Hey there, thanks so much for checking out one of our messages here at Life Bible Fellowship Church. And we know there are two great ways you can connect with us. You can visit our website at lbf.church to learn more about all of our ministries and what we believe. And also, you can subscribe to us on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss one of our future videos.
But just sort of the theme for today, as we're on the last Sunday of the year, is to both look back and also to look ahead. And probably for different ones of us, we're better at one of those than the other. Some of us, we do spend a lot of time, we are able to reflect and remember and think back, but maybe we get stuck on that. We either get stuck on the victories or the defeats of the past. And maybe for some of us, we don't even want to remember. We just want to look ahead. What's next? What's coming up? And there's a value to that, but the danger is that part of the beauty of looking back is that we get to remember all of the victories that God has won and all of the places that we've come from as we look to what's next and to how he's leading us forward. So I just want to read three verses for us, the first three verses of Hebrews chapter 12, and it says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." So just four quick notes on this passage. Number one, as we are looking for what's next, our focus is Jesus. Fixing your eyes on Jesus. If we're thinking about this from the standpoint of a run, because that's the analogy the author uses, we are looking at Jesus, and he not only, this is really cool, he not only is the prize that we're running to, but he also is our model for how we run. Because the author refers to him as the author and perfecter of faith. And then what he's talking about there, I think he's not only talking about the idea that he is at work in us perfecting our faith, but he simply says the author and perfecter of faith. Hebrews 12, some of you know this, Hebrews 12 comes right after Hebrews 11. So don't say I never taught you anything. Hebrews 11 is the great chapter of faith. By faith, Noah built an ark. By faith, Abraham left behind his homeland. By faith, Moses went to the people of Israel. It's all these men and women living by faith, and they are examples of faith to us. And now the author of Hebrews in chapter 12 at the beginning gives Jesus as the final example that he wants to give of somebody who lived by faith, because he says of Jesus, "For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." We look to Jesus as the prize that we're running towards. He is the one that we want to be close to and experience life with and experience the transformation that he brings us. But he also is our model because he faced down extreme difficulties and he persevered through because he trusted the Father's will. He's our example of faith. Our focus is on him. And the path that we walk, or in this case, the path that we run, is the path of perseverance. All the way back in verse 2, it says, in verse 1, he says, let us run. There we go. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And then in verse 3, he says, consider him, Jesus, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. If anybody's brave enough to raise your hand, anybody here feel like there's a danger of me getting weary and losing heart? Like, life can be tiring and it can be discouraging, and it can be easy just to think of this like, gosh, this is exhausting. It's this run that I'm supposed to be on. I'm losing heart. I feel like I'm not gaining traction. I feel like I'm not going anywhere. There's a call to run with perseverance. And as we look at Jesus and the reward that he won, we are encouraged to keep going forward. He wants us to run with perseverance, which is in short supply today because we don't need to wait for almost anything. So we're not used to persevering. We're not used to enduring. But perseverance is one of those virtues that you can only get after a long time. You can only get through being in a situation that's challenging and that takes a long time and cultivating the idea of continuing to move forward in faith. In fact, I encourage you, if you're thinking about this next year, like what's God calling me to? Where is he calling me to lean into growth? I'm going to encourage you, first of all, perseverance is probably going to be a part of it. And you're not going to get to wherever God wants you to get without perseverance, without continuing to go even when there's discouragement. And I don't know if this is going to be encouraging to you, but for me, strangely enough, it's encouraging to me to find out that the battle that we're in, the battle to grow in our faith, is a battle because we have an enemy. It's not just simply that we look at ourselves and say, why can't I get it together? You know, I'm so lousy at this. Why can't I get it going? You have an enemy who's tempting you and is looking to undo you. So yes, it's a battle. And yes, it's going to take perseverance. And yes, you're going to need to keep going. And you're going to need to keep repenting and keep coming back to the source of our faith, Jesus. It's going to involve perseverance. Beyond this, part of the perseverance is centered around what he talks about in verse 1 when he says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. As we look to what's next, there's no doubt that for all of us to one degree or another, the battle with sin is part of what we're leaning into. It's never over until Jesus comes back or until we go home to be with the Lord. We're always striving to win victory over sin in our lives. And all of us are struggling in it. Some of us may feel stuck in it right now. So we're looking to throw that off. But he says we're not only throwing off sin, we're throwing off everything that entangles, everything that hinders us, which means that there are things that aren't wrong, that aren't sinful, that God is calling us to shed if we're going to run this race. If you watch the Olympics and you watch really either the running or the swimming, you notice that what they wear is purposefully designed to avoid drag. They're wearing these tight-fitting clothes. In fact, I was a swimmer in high school. You were allowed, if you were a guy, you were allowed on the swim team to wear just a regular bathing suit that you would wear to the beach. It wouldn't disqualify you. You could do that. But nobody did that because of the drag. There's lots of things in our life that we're allowed to do, and we're allowed to watch, and we're allowed to have that app, and we're allowed to hang out with those people. It's not that it's not allowed, but are we living lives where we're saying, man, I don't want any drag. I don't want anything holding me back from walking closely with Jesus. And then finally, just the last thing that I want us to look at in this passage is the encouragement right at the beginning of it when he says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And almost certainly what he's referring to is all the men and women of faith that he talked about in chapter 11. He says we have all these people who went before us, who walked with faith and would tell us right now it's worth it. Quick aside, this is a little funny conversation I had just a few days ago. I was talking to a friend. He's in his mid-30s, and he was talking about whether or not he'll end up having kids, and he was sort of like, kind of want to have kids, kind of don't want to have kids. And I find myself increasingly in this role as like the older guy now. I'm like, you should have kids. I was like, you should have kids and you should have more than one. And he was like, I know. It's just, sometimes it's great when I'm sleeping in and I'm like, I don't need to get up and there's nobody, yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's nice. You should have kids. You should definitely have kids. It will definitely, and he's like, I know, I'm just a little immature right now. I'm like, you should have kids. It was funny being on this other side where, yeah, like everybody who has kids knows, yeah, there's sacrifices that you make when you have kids. They are 1,000% worth it. And I was on this other side saying, it's worth it. It's worth every sacrifice that you make. The reward far outweighs it. We have a whole cloud of witnesses, not only in heaven, but we have a cloud of witnesses right in this room that's able to encourage those of us who are growing weary to say, it's worth it. It's worth it to follow Jesus. It's worth it to fight against sin. It's worth it to persevere in your marriage. It's worth it to take that risky step of faith. It's worth it. And we get to encourage one another to walk in that. And so, as I've already mentioned, that's what we're going to do for the next part of this service. We're going to invite a cloud of witnesses to come forward and to encourage us to say, it's worth it to continue to go. So let me just give a little bit of some bearings of what we're hoping for. We had a great time with this in first service. It was really rich. We're not looking for anybody to get up here and give a long speech. We're looking for highlights, just a couple minutes of sharing about a way that you've seen God at work in your own heart, in your own growth, in a ministry that you're part of, in a next step that you experienced, in an answer to prayer, just to be brief. I know nobody needs to hear this. It's not a time for you to get up and get something off your chest. That's not what this is for. It's not like I've always wanted to say this and now everybody's going to hear it. That's not what this is for. This is for bringing an encouraging word according to the need of the moment and saying, you know what? I saw God answer a prayer, and I bet there's somebody out there that's waiting on an answer to prayer and is starting to lose heart. So I want to get up and share about how I saw God at work so that they'll keep going and keep trusting.